Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into a tense and fast-moving situation inside Belarus as President Alexander Lukashenko faces what many analysts describe as an internal military revolt. This is a moment filled with uncertainty, simmering frustrations, high-level disagreements, and the growing sense that the power structure inside the country may be shifting in ways that could redefine Belarus for years to come. In this video, we will look at what triggered the revolt, how the government is reacting, what the military leaders are demanding, and what all of this could mean for ordinary people caught in the middle of a political struggle that is unfolding behind closed doors, but having real consequences on the ground. The situation began with reports from within the Belarusian military command that certain senior officers were openly pushing back against directives coming from the presidential administration. These directives reportedly involved operational decisions, resource allocations, and broader strategic cooperation with foreign partners. For months, tension had been quietly building between the generals and the top political leadership. But the pressure reached a breaking point after several internal meetings, where officers allegedly challenged Lukashenko's instructions and argued that some orders were placing the country's security at risk. These disagreements were not simply about tactics or coordination. They represented something deeper, something tied to long-standing friction between the military institution and the political center of power. What makes this moment especially significant is that Belarus has always prided itself on strict vertical control. The military, intelligence services, and police forces have traditionally been tightly aligned with the presidency. For officers to openly resist or question decisions at the highest level is extremely rare. This abrupt shift has raised concerns among analysts that the unity within the state structure is beginning to fracture. The internal revolt is not a coup, nor is it a complete breakdown of command, but it reflects a serious rift and a loss of confidence that is much more dangerous long-term than any brief political controversy. As soon as the first reports emerged, Lukashenko moved quickly to assert control. He convened a series of emergency meetings with defense officials, intelligence chiefs, and loyal commanders. The message that came from these gatherings was one of firmness and authority. He emphasized discipline, stability, and the importance of unity under a single command. Statements were released insisting that the government remained fully in control, and that any internal disagreements would be addressed swiftly. But outside observers noted that the urgency in his responses suggested that the threat was more serious than he publicly admitted. At the core of this conflict is the question of trust. Many officers have grown increasingly uneasy about the direction of the country's strategic alliances and domestic stability. Belarus has been dealing with economic struggles, diplomatic pressures, and public frustration. The military, which often sees itself as the guardian of national security, has felt that they are being asked to manage consequences of political decisions without having input on the policies creating the problems. This disconnect widened after several regional deployments where officers believed they were operating with insufficient resources and unclear objectives. Another point of contention is the political pressure placed on commanders. Some officers reported feeling that loyalty tests, political inspections, and institutional purges had increased in recent months. These actions were interpreted not as routine governance, but as attempts to tighten control over the military leadership. This environment made it difficult for officers to express dissent internally, which may be why frustration eventually spilled into open resistance. When institutions are pushed into silence for too long, disagreements tend to erupt all at once rather than gradually. The public reaction inside Belarus has been mixed. Many citizens are accustomed to political crises, and after years of economic and social challenges, there is a sense of resignation among some. But the involvement of the military changes the tone of the crisis. People know that when armed institutions begin to fracture, the potential for instability increases. Some worry about the possibility of harsher crackdowns, tightened surveillance, or sudden restrictions if the government feels threatened. Others see this moment as a sign that the old system is beginning to weaken under pressure. They believe the fact that officers are speaking up shows that even the most loyal structures are reaching a breaking point. Internationally, the situation has drawn significant attention. Neighboring countries and global powers are monitoring the developments closely. Belarus' strategic position and alliances mean that any internal crisis could have regional implications. Analysts suggest that foreign governments are trying to understand whether this revolt represents a temporary conflict or the early stages of a deeper structural shift. The concern is that instability inside Belarus could disrupt trade routes, strain diplomatic agreements, or lead to unpredictable military decisions. Lukashenko's government insists that the situation is under control. They have highlighted statements from loyal generals, displayed images of military meetings to project unity, and released messages reinforcing discipline. But such efforts are common during internal crises, where leadership tries to create an image of stability even when the reality behind the scenes is complicated. The more the government stresses normalcy, the more observers question how severe the internal dissent really is. Inside the military itself, officers are divided. Some remain firmly loyal to the president and consider the revolt irresponsible, believing that internal disagreements should be handled quietly and that any resistance weakens national defense. Others believe the revolt is necessary to safeguard the institution and prevent the country from entering dangerous political territory. These officers argue that loyalty cannot mean blind obedience, and that leaders have the responsibility to speak up when decisions put the country or the military at risk. One key factor driving the revolt is the belief among some officers that the country is being pushed into geopolitical commitments that do not benefit Belarus. These officers feel that they should focus on national stability rather than external alliances that bring added pressure. They argue that the military should not be used as a tool for political agendas that the population has not openly endorsed. Because decision-making has become increasingly centralized, many officers feel excluded from discussions that directly impact their duties and their safety. The revolt has not resulted in violence, but the potential for escalation remains. When political authority and military leadership clash, even small misunderstandings can spiral quickly. This is why so many analysts emphasize that the situation is fragile. A wrong decision, a misinterpreted order, or an overly aggressive response could turn a controlled disagreement into a full-scale institutional crisis. Governments under pressure sometimes resort to extreme measures, and officers who already feel marginalized may react strongly if they believe they are being targeted unjustly. For years, Lukashenko's leadership has been based on firm control and swift responses to dissent. But as institutions grow more complex and external pressures increase, maintaining complete control becomes more difficult. The current revolt shows that even systems built on discipline and hierarchy can experience fractures when internal voices feel unheard. The bigger question is whether the government will address the underlying issues or simply try to suppress the symptoms. Political analysts believe the next few weeks will be critical. The government may attempt to negotiate quietly with senior officers, offering reassurances or adjustments to policy. Alternatively, it might pursue disciplinary action, removing officers who are seen as problematic and replacing them with loyalists. Both approaches carry risks. Negotiations could signal weakness, while punitive measures could intensify resentment. The military is not a small institution, and pushing too hard against dissent could deepen divisions rather than resolve them. Another possibility is that the situation stabilizes temporarily without a real resolution. Belarus has experienced periods of tension before where internal disagreements were temporarily quieted, but reappeared later with greater intensity. If the underlying frustrations are not addressed, this revolt could be the first sign of more structural challenges that will surface over time as public discontent, economic strain, and diplomatic pressures accumulate. The general population remains uncertain. Most people want stability, not political battles among the leadership. But many also hope for reform and accountability. When institutions challenge one another, it sends the message that the old systems are under stress. For some, this is frightening. For others, it is hopeful. The emotional landscape inside Belarus is complicated, with fear, frustration, and cautious optimism existing side by side. On social media, Belarusian users have been discussing the revolt with a mixture of speculation and concern. Some discuss the implications for their daily lives. Others analyze the potential political consequences. Many express the belief that the military dissent reflects deeper issues within society. People who have felt unheard or marginalized see the general's actions as symbolic. They believe it proves that even powerful figures are struggling to navigate the country's direction. Meanwhile, state media continues to downplay the crisis. They present the government as stable and united. But alternative media sources and independent commentators challenge this narrative, pointing out inconsistencies and emphasizing the unusual nature of high-ranking officers publicly resisting directives. This combination of official denial and unofficial concern creates an environment of confusion where people are left to interpret events for themselves. In the broader historical context, internal revolts within disciplined institutions often signal the beginning of significant political changes. This does not mean that immediate transformation is guaranteed. Many revolts are resolved quietly, but they often leave lasting marks, reshaping the balance of power and altering the way leaders interact with their institutions. Even if Lukashenko regains full control, the memory of officers resisting his directives will remain within the military's culture. The long-term consequences are still unclear. Some believe that the revolt will fade as quickly as it emerged, becoming just another moment of internal tension that passes without major change. Others think this is the start of a slow but steady realignment inside Belarus' power structure. If the military continues to feel neglected or pressured by political decisions, dissent could grow gradually and quietly over time. For now, what matters is that the crisis is real, the tensions are high, and the relationship between the presidency and the military has been damaged. Rebuilding trust will require significant effort from both sides. The government will need to listen more carefully to the concerns of military leaders, and officers will need to find ways to express their grievances without allowing frustration to erupt into open revolt. Whether this balance can be achieved remains to be seen. Belarus stands at a delicate crossroads. The decisions made by its leaders and its military in the coming days will shape the direction of the country. Will they choose dialogue, reform, or suppression? Will the unity of the state be restored, or will divisions deepen? These questions remain unanswered, and the world is watching closely. Whatever happens next, the internal revolt has shown that stability in Belarus is not guaranteed. Institutions once seen